You've talked a lot about evidence and the role of evidence in understanding Christianity and Christ. What Hitchens would say, and what one of our questioners said, was, wouldn't the world be a better place with less violence if it weren't for religion? Doesn't religion simply give us violence in the world?
You are good at asking these questions, aren't you? And you're asking an Irishman that question. It's not for no reason that my last book is called Gunning for God. Well, let's face the question, because I get it a lot, because I come from Northern Ireland, which hasn't got exactly the best reputation for advertising peaceful Christianity, has it? And I should mention, by the way, that my parents were very unusual. They were Christian without being sectarian. What a blessing that was. My father employed across the religious divide equally and got bombed for it. My brother was nearly killed by a bomb. So I know all about religious violence. Then they allowed me to think, which was even more rare in that kind of sectarian atmosphere. So what do I think of this? I'm ashamed of it. That's what I think of it as a Christian. Utterly ashamed of it, to be honest with you. I'm ashamed that the name of Christ has ever been associated with the use of an AK-47. But I want to explain why. And it's this. I said to Christopher, we had long conversations off camera. I said, Christopher, you stood up in this debate and you spent 15 minutes ranting essentially about this question of violence. And as I said in the public debate, I said, you're dead right, I agree with it. This is the unacceptable face of religion. But now I said, you're not radical enough. And he took one look at me and he laughed. He said, radical? I'm utterly radical. I said, not at all, you're not radical a bit. Because if you'd really read the Gospels, you'd have seen that Jesus is against the things you're against. And I said, this matter of violence is discussed at the highest level in the most famous trial in history. And that's the trial of Jesus. Why is that trial important? Well, because of the accusation. Christ, you know, ladies and gentlemen, was accused of fomenting terrorism, putting it in modern language. He was accused of being a political activist to the Roman authorities. And of course, Pilate, the procurator, was desperately nervous, especially around the time of a religious Passover festival like Passover, was desperately nervous of religious activism. So he had to know about this Jesus. What did he really stand for? Now, when they went to arrest him, two of Jesus' disciples had swords. They weren't very good at it. Because one of them took a swing and he was trying to cut a chap's head off, and he ended up cutting his ear off. And Dr. Luke tells us, now you may or may not believe this, I happen to believe it, for reasons that I could go into, but Jesus put the ear back on of the man who'd had his ears hacked off. Oh my, that tells us more than a literal story. I have noticed, ladies and gentlemen, that if you take weapons to defend Christ or his message, that's exactly what you do, is cut the ears off people. And I said to Christopher Hitchens, I said, this is cut your ears off so that you cannot hear the message of Christ. Because the message of Christ, once the man had got his ear on so they hear what the message was, Pilate said to him, look, I'm very puzzled about you. You are a king. You're claiming to be king. Yes, I am a king, but in what sense are you a king? He was desperate to know, are you a political threat to me? And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. Otherwise, my servants would have been fighting that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. To this end was I born. And to this end I came into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. What's truth? Said Pilate. Not cynically, I think, and went out and said to the people, I find no fault in this man. Do you see the logic of it? He realized what any of us would realize, that Jesus was no political threat. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the one thing you cannot do with truth is impose it by force. Especially if it's truth about forgiveness and peace with God. You can't impose it by force. So you see, people in my country who take up weapons to defend Christ and his gospel aren't following him. They're disobeying him. And they're cutting the ears off people so that they cannot hear the message. And I find it very important that we fight against this and therefore expound what actually history tells us. And it's such an irony that the very thing Christopher Hitchens was accusing Christianity of is the very thing Christ was accused of and put on trial for and acquitted of.
For more information about the Veritas Forum, including additional recordings and a calendar of upcoming events, please visit our website at veritas.org.